You are standing on the precipice of the single greatest financial disappearance in human history, occurring exactly 24 hours before the world changed forever. On September 10, 2001, inside the cold limestone walls of the Pentagon, a man in a dark charcoal suit stood behind a heavy oak podium and declared war. But he wasn't declaring war on a foreign nation, a hidden terrorist cell, or a distant ideological enemy. Donald Rumsfeld, the United States Secretary of Defense, was declaring war on the Pentagon's own internal bureaucracy. In a press conference that would be almost entirely scrubbed from public memory by the events of the following morning, Rumsfeld delivered a staggering admission. He stated that, according to the Department of Defense's own records, they were unable to track transactions totaling $2.3 trillion. To grasp the magnitude of that figure, in 2001, that was enough money to pay for the entire U.S. military budget for 6 consecutive years. It was a black hole of missing data so vast, it threatened to collapse the credibility of the entire military-industrial complex. The official explanation was as dry as it was terrifying. A legacy of archaic, incompatible computer systems. A digital labyrinth where 1970s-era COBOL code and unlinked databases allowed billions to slip through the cracks every single month. But the missing trillions weren't just errors in a spreadsheet. They were a physical trail of money moving into unapproved deep state projects and private defense contracts. At that very moment, while Rumsfeld spoke, a specialized team of over 40 civilian accountants and forensic analysts was working deep within the Pentagon's newly renovated West Wing. Their mission, known as Resource Services Washington, was to follow that trail, to reconcile the impossible ledgers, and to find exactly where that $2.3 trillion had been diverted. They were surrounded by mountains of paper records, magnetic backup tapes, and massive mainframe servers that held the only physical evidence of the theft. The atmosphere was one of intense, quiet pressure. They were the front line in a financial war, and they were closing in on the truth. If you want to delete a crime, you don't just burn the files, you burn the building. In the weeks leading up to the disaster, the Pentagon's West Wing was a hive of unprecedented, feverish activity. A specialized unit known as Resource Services Washington, consisting of high-level forensic accountants, was moved into a newly reinforced section of the building. Their objective was simple, but dangerous. Find the missing trillions before the next budget cycle. These weren't your average clerks. These were the elite of the financial world. People trained to track black budget funds through the labyrinth of offshore accounts, shell companies, and untraceable defense contracts. And they were closing in. By early September, they had reportedly identified the specific transactions that led back to unapproved deep state projects. But here is where the coincidence turns cold. The West Wing, specifically the section housing this audit team, had just completed a massive renovation. It was the only part of the Pentagon that had been fitted with blast-resistant windows and reinforced steel beams. Official reports say this was for safety, but analysts ask a darker question. Was this section reinforced to survive an impact, or to ensure that the ensuing fire would be contained and maximized exactly where the data was kept? On the morning of September 11th, as the forensic team sat at their desks, Flight 77 was performing a maneuver that defied the laws of physics for a commercial pilot. It didn't strike the Secretary's office. It didn't hit the Joint Chiefs. It performed a 270-degree descending turn to strike the West Wing at the exact level where the accountants were working. In an instant, the servers holding the digital trails were vaporized. The paper ledgers that could have brought down the military-industrial complex were turned to ash. Of the 125 people who died inside the building, a significant percentage were the very analysts tasked with finding the missing $2.3 trillion. The black hole didn't just stay open. It was sealed shut with fire and steel. While the world's eyes were fixed on the falling towers in New York, an invisible operation was being executed within the suffocating heat of the Pentagon's West Wing. The impact of Flight 77 hadn't just claimed lives. It had physically liquidated the only team capable of identifying a $2.3 trillion crime. Within hours, even as the steel was still glowing red, recovery teams in unmarked Navy windbreakers bypassed medical units with a very specific objective. They weren't looking for survivors. They were extracting hardware. Eyewitnesses reported seeing agents hauling out crates of scorched magnetic backup tapes and server nodes, loading them into blacked-out SUVs before the smoke had even cleared. Why the desperate rush to secure accounting ledgers while the building was still structurally unstable? In the following weeks, the massive audit was declared technically impossible. The official narrative was convenient. The localized furnace created by the jet fuel had burned at temperatures high enough to vaporize not just paper, but the very magnetic coating on the hard drives. But some analysts who weren't in the building that morning spoke of a digital backup stored at a secure off-site facility in Maryland. When those off-site servers were finally checked, investigators were met with a chilling discovery. The data was gone. Not destroyed by fire, but accidentally overwritten during a massive system-wide update that occurred precisely at midnight on September 10th. The timing was more than a coincidence. It was a surgical removal of the financial truth. The trail was cold. The investigation was dead. After the dust of September 11th settled, the search for the missing $2.3 trillion didn't just stall. It was efficiently and permanently buried. The war on terror had begun, and the Pentagon's annual budget exploded from hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars per year. The investigation Rumsfeld promised on September 10 was quietly dropped, as the records needed to prove the theft were now physically non-existent. Today, the black hole of the Pentagon's budget has grown even larger. Trillions more slip through the cracks every decade, unaccounted for in any official audit or congressional hearing. But where did that money truly go? Analysts suggest it wasn't lost. It was repurposed. It was diverted into unacknowledged special access programs, hidden technologies and private military developments that operate outside the reach of the U.S. Constitution. The erasure of September 11th was the perfect financial reset. It allowed a new era of untraceable spending to begin under the cover of national security. We are no longer looking for a simple error in accounting. We are looking at a permanent, global machine designed to consume public wealth and produce technological shadows. Why is the official narrative still silent? Because the truth would dismantle the very foundations of the global financial system. The missing trillions aren't just numbers on a page. They are the fuel for a hidden world. Follow the money. Question the narrative. Subscribe to the Leviathan files and join the hunt for what they are trying to hide. Stay curious. Stay vigilant. The truth remains in the black hole.